Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Vincent Vision. Today, we are talking about Halloween Horror Nights 2025's Orlando Haunted Houses. I want to share with you guys my personal anticipated list, my hype list, and talk about the haunted houses that you guys should be excited for when you visit this year's event. Overall, this year looks like it's going to be a really solid year based off of everything we have, but there are some haunted houses that I'm more excited for than others. So we're going to go over that list today. Let's get this thing started. First things first, I should mention, of course, this is just my opinion.
That's my opinion!
That opinion will change once I actually get to experience the event in a couple weeks from now, and with that, there will probably be an updated actual rankings list once I've experienced those houses. I want to make this video quick, fun, snappy. We're going to jump straight into it. Let's start with number 10 on my list of haunted houses at this year's HHN. And sitting right there at the bottom is Grave of Flesh. That is simply because we have not been given a lot to work with for this haunted house. Based off of the synopsis that we've been given for Grave of Flesh, it seems like a pretty simple concept. When you die, bad things happen. So I guess based off of what we know about this haunted house, I guess we are dying, like we're at our funeral, and then we die, and then these monsters, they eat us. And it's the Grave of Flesh. So I can probably imagine the haunted house is going to be like you're in the catacombs and, there's monsters kind of coming out at you and dead bodies, right? And, just because it has a bad description doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad haunted house. Something that I think is interesting about this one in particular is that based off of everything that we've seen so far with construction updates, based off of the sort of speculation map that goes around that's very popular, we know that this haunted house is not going to be one of the tent locations, which in my opinion, the description of this haunted house and the way it looks, this is like a tent haunted house to me. I can't really explain it, but you know what I mean? Like an idea like this always just seems like a tent haunted house. The ones in the back of the park versus they usually seem to save their really strong ideas for the sound stages. And based off of the way everything's lined up, this is more than likely going to be a haunted house that ends up in the sound stages. So it could have potential to have some really cool sets. If this is going to be sort of like a claustrophobic close-up haunted house where you're in graves and it's meant to be like you're underground. I don't necessarily know why it needs to be in a sound stage. That's something that works very well in a tent-type haunted house. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. This haunted house is going to be one of the 3 haunted houses that I will get to see with the lights on my Unmasking the Horror tour. So when that video comes out, I'm hoping that my experience or my impression of the house changes once I get to see it in person. And then you will get to see inside that haunted house as well. So for now, Grave of the Flesh, right down there at the bottom. That is my number 10 spot. Number 9 is going to be a haunted house that came out a little unexpected to me, which is Hatchet and Chain's Demon Bounty Hunters. This is a room from last year's Slaughter Cinema 2 that they are turning into a full-fledged haunted house. And they have done this before successfully. A couple years ago when they first did Slaughter Cinema, that last room at the end of the haunted house actually became 2 separate haunted houses that were both pretty awesome. If you remember Yeti Terror of the Yukon and Yeti Campground Kills, those are both really fun haunted houses, some of the best of the year, or at least some of the most memorable. Now that I think about it, Halloween Horror Nights has never really done like a bad Western house. In 2016, they had Ghost Town, The Curse of Lightning Gulch, and that was in one of the sound stages. That was a really great haunted house. That was a really fun one to go through. It was very scenic. It had cowboys and all that stuff, and where's my gold? That's where that came from. It was a cool haunted house, and I did enjoy it. So I suspect that this was going to be a fun haunted house as well. And Lightning Gulch is meant to be a little scarier. This is obviously a Slaughter Cinema haunted house, so it's meant to be a little campy, a little cheesy. But I do think, like, out of all the Slaughter Cinema 2 stuff, this was, I think, my least favorite room, I don't know, I just never really cared for the room. I was like, hey, we're in a Western thing, and it's really loud, and whatever. I think that it wasn't the room that I was most excited to see become a full-fledged haunted house as previous rooms in Slaughter Cinema have become before. But I'm willing to be proven wrong. I'll just have to wait and see. Right now, though, my excitement for Hatchet and Chain's Demon Bounty Hunters is pretty low down the list. Now, my number 8 is actually going to be the first IP that shows up on my list here, and it's actually Jason Universe. Out of all the slashers that have existed, Jason has always kind of been on the lower end for me personally. I've never really been into the Friday the 13th movies. I never really watched them. When Freddy vs. Jason came out, I was on Team Freddy. I always thought Freddy Krueger was just a more interesting bad guy, and to me, like, Michael Myers kind of does the same thing that Jason does, but just like, I just enjoy that a lot more. So this Jason Haunted House, I'm sure it'll be fun. I think at its core, this is a classic, iconic horror movie slasher. People are going to want to see this house. Camp Crystal Lake is such an iconic setting. Like, I think it's going to be a fun haunted house in a way. The way I understand this haunted house in particular is that Jason Universe is a rebrand of Jason Voorhees. So this kind of new version of Jason that we're getting isn't necessarily like linked to the old movies, you know, all these movies that have come out over the years. And we are now seeing sort of that first iteration of it here at Halloween Horror Nights. So as I say that out loud, it is a pretty exciting concept, but I never like when we do sort of corporate synergy meddling into our Halloween Horror Nights haunted houses. You know what I mean? You know, a couple of years back, we got this with Chucky. There was a Chucky haunted house at the event that was not very good, and it was very clearly a haunted house meant to promote the brand new Chucky show on Sci-Fi. It didn't have any connection to the Child's Play movies that people were more familiar with. And this is kind of what the Jason haunted house feels like. So because of that, I'm a little skeptical of it, and I'm also just not a super big fan of Jason, so it kind of sits low on the list for me. From there, we jump up to number 7, and this is Gulkin Monsters of the North. So this one seems like an interesting concept. This is going to be one of the original haunted houses this year, and it seems to be following the trend of something like Monsters of Latin America, where we got the monsters from the South, you know, South America, and now we're going to get monsters from other countries, other parts of the world, specifically like Europe, Northern Europe. There's a really cool room in the Museum Deadly Exhibits haunted house last year where you were going through a Viking ship, and I'm hoping that that is the aesthetic that kind of carries over to this Gulkin haunted house. I also don't really know much about the monsters of Northern Europe or whatever this is based off of, so I might be introduced to a whole new type of scary monster, and it might be pretty darn awesome. Based off everything we've seen with the haunted houses, this one is going to be a haunted house in the tent locations, all the way in the back. And I'm not super in love with those haunted houses. I think the space is big, and I think they can do a lot with it. Like, we've seen them create large sets, but really, I've yet to see a haunted house in the back out of the two we've had that was really wowed me. You know what I mean? Even Goblin's Feast, which I really enjoyed last year, that was one of my favorite haunted houses of 2024, but that's also just because 2024 wasn't a very strong year to begin with, in my opinion. There was only really one haunted house that year that like rose to the top, and that was Insidious. So I'm hoping to see them use this space more creatively. This is a brand new space in the world of Halloween Horror Nights, so I understand that they're not going to kind of figure out what they can do with it in the best way 100% right off the bat, and I look forward to learning more about the Gulkin. But there are 6 other haunted houses this year that are really way up my list compared to the 3 that we've talked about. The 6th one being the other tent house that we've seen based off construction, which is Fallout. Fallout is really big IP, but kind of with like Jason Universe, we're seeing a little bit of like corporate meddling in there, in the sense that this isn't necessarily based off the Fallout games, it's based off the Fallout show, which is based off the games. I've only seen a couple episodes of the Fallout show. It seems to be done pretty faithfully, but it seems like we're just gonna get like a recap of the first season of Fallout versus being taken through this world of Fallout, which has this really expansive lore, has very, very many iconic locations that aren't just like the vaults, you know, there's like New Vegas, there's this, there's that. And there's a lot of meat on the Fallout bone. So the fact that they're just kind of honing in on the Fallout show, which, you know, I guess makes sense. It's pretty topical. All the characters are characters that people recognize. I just kind of wish it was based off the video games a lot more. I think Fallout kind of sits in the middle for me just because it doesn't feel like they're using it to its full potential. Now, the next one, number 5, is one that I think is on the top of the list for a lot of people. But for me, just because I'm not super familiar with it, it's gonna sit at number 5. But that doesn't mean that I don't recognize its potential, and that is WWE presents The Horrors of Wyatt 6. So I don't know anything about wrestling. I watched it when I was a kid, I grew out of it, and I never kept up with it. But I know that wrestling has a lot of history and lore and characters and story and all of that stuff. And this Wyatt, or Bray Wyatt, I think his name is, has a big story involving kind of horror elements. I've watched some clips about the Wyatt Six. I haven't fully done my research about these characters and who they are, but something that I have seen ever since this haunted house has been announced is the reception that it's gotten from Halloween Horror Nights fans, and specifically the people who are helping create Halloween Horror Nights. They all seem really, really excited about this thing. So I have learned that whenever something is a true passion project at Halloween Horror Nights, it ends up being one of the best haunted houses. So I am kind of excited to see this become like a sleeper hit for the general population, right? I do think a lot of Halloween Horror Nights fans and a lot of wrestling fans are kind of the same people, but I think a lot more of the casual audience that come to HHN for something like Five Nights at Freddy's aren't necessarily linked to the WWE. So I'm excited to see how they choose to tell this wrestling story into a big haunted house. I'm excited to see how this goes, but it does kind of sit in the middle for me just because I don't know anything about it, right? I gotta look more into it. Now, number 4 is one that I'm pretty excited for because I think this is such a cool concept. This is the original haunted house. It is called Dolls Let's Play Dead. I had a haunted house from many, many years ago that I loved, and it was Dollhouse of the Damned. And that was such a fun haunted house. It had all these different rooms with characters and dolls and big babies. If Dolls Let's Play Dead is anything like that, we're gonna have a really fun haunted house in our hands. And this is such an iconic, quintessential haunted house theme, right? Spooky dolls. So I think just because of that alone, this dollhouse is something that I'm very, very excited to see. So Dolls Let's Play Dead, I don't really have much to say about it, but I just think it's such a fun idea that I think a lot of people are going to love it, and I think it has the potential to be a very memorable haunted house. Now from here, we hit our top 3, and I'm going to go ahead and say this number 3 is one that I'm pretty excited for, and I think leading up to the event was the one that I was most excited to see them confirm, and that is Five Nights at Freddy's. Now this is my number 3 because while I am excited to see this haunted house finally happen, I enjoy the Five Nights at Freddy's games and the movie I really enjoyed. I do think, kind of like Fallout, they don't seem to be going all the way with Five Nights at Freddy's. You know what I mean? This seems really more based off of the first movie than the actual like Five Nights at Freddy's world. You know what I mean? So I kind of anticipate this haunted house being a walkthrough of the first film. I think that's okay with me because you are still going to get a lot of iconic locations. You are going to go into Freddy Fazbear, like you have to go through Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, right? Like you have to have the big neon sign, and you walk in, and you're gonna go through the place where they have all the tables, and like I think you're gonna be able to walk through a lot of these iconic sets. I think we're gonna see the puppets, like I think it's gonna end up being a really satisfying experience. Even if the house isn't super, super scary, I think just a big part of what gets me excited about Halloween Horror Nights is being in these scenes or stepping into these worlds through the haunted houses. And I think I'm excited to see what the Five Nights at Freddy's one ends up being like. So we shall see how that ends up going, but I am still pretty excited to see it nonetheless. Now, number 2 is a pretty big one for a lot of people, and this is Terrifier. Okay, so I saw the first Terrifier movie for the very first time last night with Ellison, and it was pretty intense. I mean, it wasn't that bad. Okay, I have to say, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. It was pretty bloody, it was pretty graphic, and there were definitely 1 or 2 scenes that were pretty extreme, and I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Terrifier as a movie franchise has really shot up in the past couple years as far as like iconography and popularity, and Art the Clown is a true brand new modern horror icon. That is plain to see. I haven't seen Terrifier 2 or 3 yet. I will get to it. I already know about the movies, right? Because people talk about them, and I've seen clips and little things like that. These movies are graphic, these movies are bloody, these movies are insane, and if done faithfully and as accurately as can be in a Universal theme park setting, I think we have what is going to be a crazy, nuts, awesome, highly talked about haunted house at this year's event. People love Terrifier, and it's really scary for a lot of people, and it's really gory, and I think if you just recreate those nasty kills in real life and have Art the Clown popping out at you from different corners, you know, this is a character kind of like the Five Nights at Freddy's characters. This is someone that people want to see in real life and have an experience with. I think you are on track for a very, very satisfying haunted house. And I think that Universal knows that, and I also think that the creators of Terrifier, I think Damien Leone is his name. I've heard about interviews where he's very, very excited to be making a Terrifier haunted house. You know, they've talked about doing a dry ending and a wet ending, where one ending you get covered in blood and guts and all that kind of stuff like that. So it seems like it's going to be a really fun house, right? Like it's going to be a really entertaining house. This is definitely going to be one of the longest lines all throughout the event. I'm kind of excited to see Terrifier, just because I know I'm going to go through the haunted house like this and go, oh my gosh, what am I looking at? Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? And then lastly, my number one is an original that ties the entire event together. It is El Artista, A Spanish Haunting. For all intents and purposes, this is going to be our sort of icon house, where this house and everything that happens here kind of ties the aesthetic of the entire event together, which is the conservatory. We're getting a brand new sort of iconic character, as they like to call now, with Sergio Navarro. That is sort of the character that we follow through the El Artista haunted house, and I just think it's going to be a really, really beautiful house. I'm expecting this house to be really, really impressive, and of course, I just love an icon house. I love something that is kind of like the story of the whole park, and the Artista haunted house seems like it's going to be that house for us. I'm also imagining a lot of Gothic inspired sets. You know, there was a haunted house a couple years back called Gothic that involved gargoyles and really cool optical illusions that made you feel like you were really high up. There was a haunted house that I never got to see that people really, really enjoyed, which was, I think it was called Winter's Night. That's one that I always heard was really beautiful and really scenic. And then in even slightly more recent years, there was Graveyard Games in, I think, 2019, and that was a really great haunted house too. That one had ghosts and mausoleums and caverns, and it was very gothic as well. So I'm excited to see this El Artista, this Spanish haunting, see how they're able to turn this into like a Spanish gothic inspired Encanto from hell. You know, that's what I want. I want to go through the house from Disney's Encanto, but like a nightmare hell version of it. And I think that El Artista is going to give us that. And with it being the connecting thread of all of this year's event, I am extra excited to see how it goes. In fact, I think I want this to be like the first haunted house I go into, as it kind of sets the tone for the whole night. And there you have it, folks. This here is my list for this year's Halloween Horror Nights, the haunted houses that I am most excited to see when I get to experience the event with all of you. For those who watch this video all the way to the end, leave a comment down below and tell me what you are most excited to see. Or actually, go ahead and give me like your most excited haunted house and then your least excited haunted house. I'm very, very curious to hear your thoughts on this year's event, see how it links up to mine. I do think that no matter what, overall this year seems to be a pretty, really solid year. But apart from that, that is really all I've got for now. Thank you guys for watching another Vincent Vision, and I will see you in the fog. Bye-bye.